Primordial Radio.
Primordial Radio, we are going to be playing, I was going to say the brand new album from Trivium, because it's just the way I'm used to introducing these things, Paolo, but I'll say the latest album from Trivium in the court of the Dragon, but also as well, we're just going to be catching up with Paolo from the band as they're mid-tour across the UK right now. So yeah, really looking forward to this. Paolo, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very good. Yeah, the album is kind of weird. This album and the last album, they're kind of these weird... kind of new, kind of old in some ways, but it's like we've been touring and making up shows like this tour, so it's like it feels like we're just kind of like in a holding pattern as a new album. So I guess it's still technically new since we haven't toured here yet.
You know, it's really interesting as we were setting up the conversation and chatting with your label and getting the times and everything like that sorted. Your label guy, Ollie, was saying that it's the first time you've been over and you know, and it's since COVID, but you've actually got two albums to promote, essentially, because you've got What the Dead Men Say.
It's that really crazy.
That must be weird. And how is that affecting set lists? So you're like, oh, we got to jam in all this new stuff.
Well, I guess like for this for this tour, you know, obviously on the Ireland and UK dates, it's a little bit longer of a set, and so we have a little bit more room to kind of fit some stuff in. But even with like a 90-minute set, say, it's like we have to make a lot of hard choices. And so I think what we're doing is, because a lot of people, you know, not everyone, but a lot of people do travel to multiple shows, we're kind of trying to like disperse some of the new stuff. So it's like, oh, you might get this new one, you might get that one new one, but it doesn't feel like it's so, you know, we're just overloading it with like all new stuff. So it's like a good combo of things, but we have to make tough choices every day. It's like, do we play this long song today and then have to take two songs out? Do we, you know, it's always this one of those kind of things.
Because songs are like your kids, right? You love them all. So it's very difficult
I definitely,
choices.
I don't know. I guess I view it as like, you know, you have to make sure that it's like a good balance. And I think one thing that we're pretty good at now is like, if we're going to rotate a song in, the song that it's being rotated with has to be sort of like an equal, I guess, value in a way. Like if we're taking like Light to the Flies out, Gunshot would be a good choice, you know, and not like, oh, we're going to rotate this with this newer song, just so like that once we kind of get the flow of a set list, then we plug songs in that are sort of like equal to that, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's a kind of a good way to kind of keep a sort of certain flow once we get it set, and then we just plug songs in here and there. It's good for us too, because that way we're not getting kind of just like, oh, you're going through the motions, and by week 6 you're like, I don't want to play the song ever again. It's like, it always feels good. Which inevitably
happens as a band, particularly if you've been on a long... I can imagine you must have got like that on Ascendancy at some point because of how long that tour cycle was.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. I mean, maybe back then it wasn't as bad because it's like it's all kind of a newer thing, but now it's like... And I love, you know, if a song's big and the crowd reaction is great, it's like, you know, you can play it 1,000 times and it's always going to feel good, but it's also for just it kind of keeps us on our toes when it's like you get the set list and it's not exactly the same. You got to like really be paying attention. And I know we like it. We also like rehearse before the show. We kind of got our own little, you know, we kind of took inspiration from when we did the tour with Megadeth and Lamb of God. Megadeth had their little jam room set up, and we're like, you know, we could probably pull that off now. And like, so we did. And it's nice because now we can just rotate songs in and out when we want. And we're pretty well rehearsed on the road.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about people going to multiple shows, and I saw a tweet, I think, from Matt last night saying the most shows that any one fan had been to was like 154 or something. Oh, like that.
Yeah.
Do you? I'm guessing you know who that person is.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a friend of ours that, you know, we've known her since the first tour, and like, you know, remain good friends. And there's a lot of people that, you know, we remain friends with from like back in 2005 touring over here. And you know, it's great to keep in touch with so many people and stuff, and have so many friends around the world and people that have seen us so many times. And it also kind of just makes us remember that, like, hey, you gotta keep things fresh with set list. And so we're always trying to balance those things out. And same thing with even writing records. It's like we gotta keep making an effort here because people keep coming back, and you know, we want to make sure we try to keep it up to that level that they expect.
I can imagine she'll be coming back to you with notes soon, being like, "Oh well,
I know.
that could have been a little bit better." Oh, Paolo, you're slightly off there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always fun because we'll be like, "Hey, what do you want to hear tonight?" And, put them on the spot for a change. You make the decision.
Absolutely.
What we got to do every night.
Great. So we are going to be playing In the Court of the Dragon in its entirety. Really looking forward to this. So we're going to get to the opening track, which is an intro, which was written by Ishan. And it seems like both, obviously, Matt with Ibaraki, but also just Trivium as a whole has developed a really great relationship with Ishan. How did it all sort of come about?
I mean, obviously, Matt's like a really big Emperor fan, and I feel like we met him maybe like at a festival or something back in the day, maybe. I don't even know which one, but we met him. Super nice dude, and I forget how, but it basically was on Silence in the Snow where we kind of like were like, hey, we should get him to help us with an intro. He's very good at these orchestral type pieces, and that was kind of how it started. And so it's kind of developed into that, and he's kind of a dude that if we need an outside ear to kind of help us with those kind of things, because he also on this record. There's a couple songs where some of his like parts are within the song, like sort of like, again, the strings or just certain noises or whatever. And so it's kind of cool to be able to kind of get an outside ear, take some music we had and kind of add some layers into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's do this now. We'll get into track 1 of the album, written by Ishan. It is the opening, and I'm guessing this is Roman numerals for 10?
Yes, we did that with What the Dead Men Say, and since... in my opinion, What the Dead Men Say in the Court of the Dragon are sort of like, they're not officially a double album, but in a way, because of the weirdness of touring going away and, this record being written while we just couldn't tour, they kind of feel like they're kind of two albums that are just linked together in a kind of a weird way. So we kind of kept the theme going with the intro.
Amazing. Let's do this now. Trivium and 10. Primordial Radio, that is Trivium in the Court of the Dragon, the title track from their latest album. Here with Paolo from the band as we are going through and playing every single track from their album as they're touring through the UK right now. And Paolo, I'd like to actually sort of go into the whole idea of this album and sort of delve into this, because I was reading up about the album, and if I'm right, the idea behind In the Court of a Dragon was you were sort of creating your own mythology for this album. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess like when we were kind of like initially writing, and some of the lyrics and songs were sort of like, I guess you could say kind of similar to like Shogun, having like the songs that were kind of like based off these like myths and sort of that sort of thing. I just suggested like, what if we just sort of like kind of threw out like having to stick to any sort of actual like mythology that's been written and just sort of kind of make it up ourselves. And that was sort of where we went with it. And it was kind of nice because then you're not as worried about like, well, we got to stick to this or kind of
historical accuracy.
Yeah.
Sort of
or just, we could kind of just let it kind of free flow. And that was kind of a nice thing to do, especially with having so much time. There was really no rush to kind of like, hurry up and get things done. Even though we did, basically start the record right after we released the last one. But that was just sort of a fun thing to do. And I mean, the title comes from a book that I
was going to ask you about that, The King in Yellow.
Yeah, and that was sort of like, it's kind of like taking the title and just sort of running in a different direction with the whole thing. Well, kind of, I guess, alluding to some of the aspects of that story, and also there's all of that King in Yellow type stuff. And again, that kind of helped with a lot of the visuals and a lot of the first videos and stuff when we were working with everyone putting it together. But, it was just, this whole record, it was just an escape from the moment. We didn't have any touring in sight. And it was like, we can sit here and kind of just do nothing, or we could at least come together and just kind of create something out of it. And that was really it. These riffs, these songs, the storytelling, just kind of preparing the record's art and everything was just sort of our escape, And I guess that is what music and what art is for. It's an escape. And this was like literally our escape from just the moment.
And And certainly when I look back at lockdown now, there was a flurry of music because, yes, escapism was needed more than ever during that point. On the mythology itself, are these just sort of like made up characters, or is there actually like an element of talking about the history of Trivium itself? Like, are you looking at the history of the band and sort of intertwining stories of the actual history of Trivium with a little bit of mythology?
I mean, I guess with this, it's really sort of a broad thing. I feel like a lot of like myths and stuff are just sort of archetypes, characters. And so like when you do use something that's like pretty broad, but like a character that you could see in another story, you start to see patterns and see things. And I guess that's maybe a fun thing to see is like what people kind of take from that. And because it's really, like I said, open-ended to, not being part of like any specific story, I guess any interpretation of that would be correct. And, maybe there's like sort of a subconscious thing as we write, maybe we're kind of like taking internal things about our own story and our own history and kind of putting it onto those characters that we're making without even really thinking about it. You're just sort of like,
so it's almost like a subconscious projection.
Yeah,
almost.
It could be. I guess that would be, especially if it's other people viewing it and being like, well, I kind of see this sort of storyline as something of the Trivium story, and I guess maybe that would be correct because we would be writing it not even thinking that, and it's sort of coming across that way. And I think I've never really considered it that way, so that is a very cool interpretation of it.
Okay, all right. Well, that's the beauty of music, is that you can interpret things in different ways. But we'll get to track 3 now, like Sword Over Damocles. And whenever I think of that, it's almost like a saying, isn't it? And when I think of it, it's almost like pressure. Like, oh God, I got the Sword of Damocles hanging over me. Like, we just get it over with. So, how did this song come about?
Well, Corey came in with like the initial riffs and stuff, and I think his working title was Sword Over Damocles. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's a great, obviously, this kind of gets back to the whole, using actual myths, actual stories. I'm like, well, if we're going to kind of go our own route, I'm like, well, I like the Sword Over Damocles. That's a great, just a great thing to have within the story. But I'm like, well, we're not going to use the actual story. So it's like, I guess making it like a Sword Over Damocles was like, it's like referencing the myth, referencing the saying, to kind of get across what we're trying to say within the song. And this is like definitely one of my favorites from the record, and actually to play live from the new songs. And it was again, just kind of freeing, not having to kind of stick to the actual story, but using it sort of like as the expression. And this was a fun one to put together in the writing. I felt like it was just very like, we got to the middle and we're just like, where do we go now? What do we do next? And since getting Alex in the band on Sin and Sentence, I feel like the writing has kind of been like that. It's kind of crazy to even think that we have 3 records with him already. And obviously he's been in the band for like 6 years now, but 3 records in 6 years. But I guess our pace of recording and writing has been, when I think about it now, it's like, well, I guess we've been pretty consistent with records, like 2-3 years at most. And this last run of records, the 3, I mean, definitely, I think some of our strongest stuff in terms of like follow-ups. I think each record's got something cool, something unique. And I mean, really, some of my favorite stuff to kind of pull from for our set list. And I've been so surprised at how well they go over. And this one in particular is just, it's got something about it that just great live to play. It just feels good.
It feels like a sort of good early on in the set, like get everybody
going.
Yeah,
honestly, I feel like we could probably even open this song in the set, and it could have been an album opener itself. And I guess when you kind of got that first 1-2 of the album, it's got to feel like that.
Let's do this now. This is Trivium, track 3 from the new album, In the Court of the Dragon. This is Like a Sword Over Damocles. Primordial Radio, that is Feast of Fire from Trivium, from the latest album, In the Court of a Dragon. Here with Paolo from the band as we are going through track by track, talking about the album as they're currently touring through the UK. And Paolo, we were just sort of discussing there the subtleties between actual mythological things like a sword over Damocles and then, sort of the story of Trivium. So I have to ask, Feast of Fire, is there a slight nod to Anthem We Are the Fire with that track?
That definitely wasn't the intent, but I guess again it's very possible to be viewed that way.
Because also the song itself has a very sort of anthemic feel to it.
Yeah, definitely. And it definitely didn't start like that. This was one of those songs where we've had this happen quite a bit throughout our career where it comes in much faster, much different, and it kind of goes through the assembly line in the studio, and it comes out completely different. And it really kind of came down to, it's one of the later tracks of the pre-pro where it's like we kind of had like our feel of like maybe more proggy stuff, maybe faster stuff. And it was kind of like, well, the song was cool, but we kind of need something a little different to kind of maybe round this out. And that's where like the Feast of Fire main riff was like a fast riff, you know, and you just kind of slow it down, start grooving it out a little bit, and it sort of sends you off in a whole different direction. And that was one we kind of put together actually in pre-pro in the studio, which is kind of a rare thing for us, because I think we've learned over just trial and error, like the way we work best is we go into our rehearsal spot and we work on our stuff, and then we show whoever's producing it. Then we kind of let the outside ear come in and sort of shape it from there. But, you know, with Josh Wilbur, it's been nice because he's like kind of a really great producer for us, the way he kind of works, the way he assesses what we do. And we kind of trust his judgment. And, you know, when he's like, hey, you know, maybe we could try something like this or like give it a go, you know, we're not like shutting him down and be like, no, this is how it goes. Like we're always open to at least trying the idea and seeing where it goes. And this was one of those that went in a good spot.
Absolutely. On the production side of things, and Josh Wilbur, yeah, he's an amazing producer, but there's been a few stories that came out recently from Nuggle, from Behemoth, where he was basically saying a lot of metal records are sounding the same, too polished, Pro Tools, overuse of technology ultimately, and a lot of records are sounding the same. Like, would you agree with that? And is it something that you're conscious of as you record, that it's just so easy to fix things, but ultimately there is a sort of convergence of production across the metal world right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just the technology part of it, where it's like everyone can have access to the same like suite of tools and apps and you know, plugins and all those kind of things. And you know, that's where you have to just be very creative on your own and trying to kind of put some maybe boundaries and guidelines within what you're creating, because the limitless of like nature of Pro Tools and stuff is, you know, maybe good in some ways, maybe bad in others. I guess really at the end of the day, though, it's like, you know, fans are kind of making the judgment with their ears, and maybe if it sounds a little too slick for some people, maybe that's a good thing for others. I mean, I know for me, like I have a sort of thing with like there's some stuff where it's like almost too raw and too unpolished for me, and like it's off-putting, but other people might find something very endearing and good about it, you know?
I think there's both sides of it. So I definitely feel like that with some records. So one of my favorite bands from the 80s is Testament. But actually, I really liked when they re-recorded, did the First Strike Still Deadly stuff, and I actually kind of prefer Chuck Billy growling, like more of the death metal style, really than the screech. But I guess if you grew up in the 80s and you were used to Chuck doing the
I love the
screams,
old thrash stuff, but like there's some of the thrash bands, like, you know, great example, like you said, Testament or Exodus, Overkill, even Creator, where I find myself drawn to their newer output a little bit more, just because the production value gets the intensity of the band across better. You know, of course, like, yeah, I wouldn't touch Master Puppets the way it sounds. It's great, but I'm like, it's like, you know, Metallica's big,
although you did with your cover, of course.
Oh, true, yeah. But Metallica's like grand, like big kind of more rock sound on their later records. I'm like, well, that kind of gets the band across now, but I wouldn't want to hear Master Puppets like that because it's already perfect. But, you know, again, with new music, it's like, yeah, I'm like, you're always kind of adjusting with the times with sounds and stuff. And, you know, I think a lot of it comes down to production from the producers and mixers. They're the guys that are kind of in the weeds with stuff. And I think, you know, if you're given like a chance to like make your stuff sound better, I'm like, you're going to try. And, you know, I think there's like a limit to like, okay, well, you can make stuff sound a lot more clear, or you can fit more stuff into the mix, but there's always trade-offs to that. And it's not always going to be perfect, but I'm like, you're always trying to give each record something unique about it. And
I think that's the key thing, is unique, because definitely I do lean more towards the cleaner production. But one thing that I do love about metal over the years, and particularly with certain sounding albums, I love when you can identify an album from, say, the sound of a snare. So if I hear that Black Album snare straight away, like without hearing any of the song, just go, that. There's a certain sound of the production. Same with like Master Puppets or Pantera, whatever it might be. So I think it's like, I don't think bands necessarily need to go back to, hey, we're just going to record with an SM58 in the room, because I don't think people really want that. But it's like how you create this individuality and uniqueness to every album.
Yeah, you really kind of have to. And I mean, you might go in and try to do something that raw, and then you're like, wow, this is not working. And then you go from there. And maybe that's the way to do it. Like, you start from a place of what you'd like it to be, and then you go what it should be. And that's kind of, I guess, where we go with stuff. And you know, when you get to, now we're on this is album 10, so it's even harder because you have so much stuff, and it's like, where do you go? We've done so much already, and that's always a tricky thing of like, where do you go next? How much do you adjust? How much do you change from album to album to, make that impact? And that's always the hardest part.
Absolutely. So we'll get to track 5 of the album now, A Crisis of Revelation, and we've sort of been talking about the story of Trivium in a sense as it's laced through this album. To me, actually, this track sort of reminded me of the Deceived a little bit, the way it sort of kicks in.
It's kind of like maybe of all the songs on this record, maybe one of the ones that's like the most throwback sounding of things. Deceived, Ascendancy, the song Ascendancy itself. And I mean, again, when we kind of started like jamming it, it was kind of going a different way. And then it just felt right to kind of go to that sort of place with it, where it's like, we're not a band that's like so like obsessed with like nostalgia. But we don't like, I feel like it now, we're not like, we don't shy away from like, that is like our sound too.
I think it's something to be proud of as well. If a band can create a sound that people love, then ultimately you should be proud of that. Whether you go full AC/DC or,
yeah, and I definitely do. It's like, like there's like callbacks to things, but I'm like, if you're lucky enough to have something where people can be like, wow, that kind of gives me a vibe of like this record or whatever. And I mean, I think that even for us, like it's cool. It's cool because it's like you have a place like, it's kind of like an anchor, where you can go with like your sound, where you don't feel like, what are we doing? Like, what is our sound? What is like something that people like to hear? And it helps because it makes the song kind of, when you start off, like you feel like you're in a comfort zone, but then from there, it's like we can kind of jump off into like, especially the middle section, it's really a lot more proggy and out there and more, I guess if anything, it's like now being able to write like a sound that we were writing maybe almost, a little under 20 years ago. It's like we're just such better, I think, musicians and more capable that we're able to pull off things that would have been maybe something we would have never thought of, like the whole kind of, the tapping part where we're all kind of like doing different things and it all comes together and all kind of, we go on separate parts. And I don't know, it's just a lot more complexity than what we did back then. And so it's nice to kind of be able to like have a little bit of it all, being in a place we know well, but also being able to push it forward a bit. And it was kind of the same on the last record. I think there's a couple points on the record that were like kind of throwback in that way. And it felt good. It didn't feel like, just like, these guys ran out of ideas and they're trying to kind of live in the glory days. It's like, nah, it kind of feels like we're furthering it, but it's like a place, and it feels good. And that's always, for me, I guess, I always like look at other bands I look up to, like the Metallicas and Megadeth, and I'm, when I hear the new stuff and there's something, I'm like, man, that kind of gives me this vibe. And I'm like, but it feels good. It doesn't feel like cheap. And, that's why you go back to things you like. There's something about it. You want to hear from those artists. And I guess that's what we do for our sound, for our fans.
For sure. Let's get to this now. So this is Trivium with A Crisis of Revelation. Primordial Radio, track 6 from the latest Trivium album, In the Court of the Dragon. That is The Shadow of Abattoir. I'm here with Paolo from the band playing the album in full. And I was reading online earlier today, dude, that was that actually a scrapped Shogun song?
No. This one, that's the Phalanx.
No, I don't think it was Wiki. Someone got that wrong.
Yeah. The Phalanx is one that was from that writing session. This one is sort of the middle section I actually wrote first while I was still living in Chicago. And then when I moved back down to Florida, then I wrote the other part, the clean intro part. And they basically lived separately as just parts. There was no demo. But I was like, I think these two things can work together. And, it's sort of one of those, I guess you could say, when the way I view like with writing and stuff, like there's sort of like how there's like an archetype or there's sort of like a way to write a story in certain parts or whatever. I think songs kind of are similar in a way where it's like there's certain structures that you can kind of take in it as a template. And this is one of those where it's like it kind of has this sort of first piece and then it kind of moves into the next piece and then it comes back on the third piece. And sometimes you can kind of take the third piece as like it returns to something or it kind of goes to something else. And this one is a sort of, the third and final piece after it comes out of the big kind of proggy middle section is a return to the beginning, but like something different now. It's a little bit heavier. It's a little bit faster. And this one was really fun to make because, again, I brought in these two kind of separate things and like we got to figure out how to piece it all together and make it work. And that's where the jamming and stuff kind of comes in. You kind of are assembling it and you're making sure it's sturdy and it doesn't feel like jarring when we go into different parts of it. But this one was fun to make. It's just a little different and we could be a little bit more melodic in the beginning and let it kind of expand into something a little bit more proggy and intense in the middle. And another one that's been really fun live. Yeah.
It sounds like almost like this has been this particular track is a little bit of your baby, and it sounds like in general that you yourself have had a little bit more input on this Trivium album than perhaps previous albums.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of since like Crusade, me, Matt, and Corey is sort of have been, I guess, kind of writing a lot of the riffs and stuff and a lot of parts, and we'll bring in our kind of individual ideas and then we shape it from there. I think the last couple, really, it's just sort of, each of us will bring in maybe 3 to 4 kind of solid ideas and we'll shape it from there. And that's usually it's worked so far pretty well because I feel like I'm able to kind of really kind of put everything into like 3 or 4 things and not feel like I need to write an album's worth or Corey needs to write an album's worth or Matt needs to write an album's worth. We kind of all have a ton of stuff, but we kind of are like, okay, everyone bring in like the 3 or 4 you're really kind of feeling, and we go from there. And if it feels like we need more, we'll go in and do more, or someone will bring something in. But like, yeah, like with this one, it was just one of the ones that I felt pretty good about. I'm like, this is something different, and I feel like some of my best stuff is just the one where it's like, maybe it's not the most obvious thing, but I feel like it's a little different. It's going to kind of like go somewhere we're not expecting. Like In Waves was another one for me where it was just like, yeah, this is kind of different than what we've been doing, but it felt right. Felt like a cool idea to run with. And I'm like, that's how sometimes I think my best stuff that I bring in usually comes about, where it's like, well, how can we do this a little differently? And trying to just think of something different to throw into the mix of what we write.
And you mentioned that you don't have to bring in, an album's worth of material each. I completely understand that. But given how active you all are, not just as a band, but as individuals, it kind of seemed like you probably could do that. And one thing that's, I think, has been really key for Trivium over the past few years is I think you've really embraced as a band and as individuals the need to essentially be content creators in a way. How's that been as a transition as band members? Because when you started, it was like, right, we're the band and we're going to tour, play live shows, and then that's kind of it. Maybe we'll put something on our MySpace. Now you're doing playthroughs, you're doing Twitch, and you're doing all these things. How's that balancing act going?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the balancing act, the biggest part is like making sure it's not interfering with like family life too much. Everyone but Corey has kids now, families, and so like for me personally, I'm like, I'll always pull back things at home that, when it was the pandemic, Twitch was a very good outlet. Since we've been touring again, since I had my daughter last year, I've pulled back a lot on that stuff, but on tour it's like, it's a full-on thing. And actually, starting on the Maiden headlining tour, maiden and headlining tour, not maiden headlining, but that tour we just did in the States, we just brought someone on that's actually helping us with capturing all of this content, because it is a full-time gig. It's a big part of what we do. And kind of like, I think our justification for it was like, part of what we're doing is like we're projecting like what we're doing, what we are, and people are responding to visual stuff. Like in the way we talked about earlier, not swearing on a YouTube thing and the algorithm and all that stuff. We're all kind of thinking about these
Adjusting.
sort of things that we don't really have any idea what they are or what they do, but we got to kind of follow some of the rules to make things get out there. And yeah, so we're promoting our tours, our albums, and what we're doing, and making people excited to want to come see us. And we all can do some stuff, but we don't have the time or mental capacity to do it all ourselves and to edit and stuff. I think you could maybe and just completely burn out, but having someone out to help us capture these things, one, if the quality is much better. It's, Maria, who's doing it, Black Card Films is her thing, and it's stuff that I could never imagine, in the way that I can pick up a bass and I feel comfortable, that's her with the camera. And we do that with everything we do, like artists, the dude that did our album cover, we didn't even, all we said was like, just listen to it, In the Court of the Dragons title, make it epic. You're the artist. We're coming to you. You're the master, And we let him go. And 2-3 months later, he comes back with this incredible art.
It's like a Renaissance
Yeah,
piece,
we have it up at our
isn't
hangar.
it? Yeah.
It's 6x6. It's like so impressive. And there was no way I could have ever given him any sort of input beforehand. And maybe this is off topic, but I just, trusting people that are experts at what they do. Same thing with like tattoos.
So part of that process, letting go of control a little bit, which I think, let's be honest, that is difficult, I think, for anyone in life, letting go of control, if you have control.
Yeah, there's a quality control aspect to it. Like, if it's not something we like, of course we would never let it get to that point. But there is a thing when you find someone that like you like their work, you got to trust them and not micromanage everything. And also that just kind of, for your own health, mental health, it's not like you're not going to go crazy.
Go off and enjoy time with your daughter whilst the editing is taking place.
I love that. I don't want to be so stressed out over every.
At 1
no.
o'clock
I'll tell you, send me when you're ready, and I'll tell you, like, yeah, this is killer.
Well, I think the key difference as well, what I'm really noticing with Trivium content, is you actually seem to enjoy yourselves. Because I know a lot of bands will like, oh, we've got to do the TikToks, we've got to do it, and they're really just forcing themselves to. But you do actually seem to enjoy it, particularly on your bass playthroughs. Those have been getting a great response.
I'm like TikTok, that's like something I'm just like not like, I respect that it's a thing, but I'm like, I just feel like I got enough things to post on. Yeah, and I'm like, maybe I could, and maybe it would be useful for something, but I'm also like, I don't feel like I need to, and so I'm like, I just am not going to. But I'm like, it doesn't mean I'm like totally not going to do it, and if ever the day feels like I'm okay, I feel like I'm just like, this doesn't feel like good, it doesn't add to anything, and then I would probably stop whatever, whether it's Twitter or Instagram, where I mainly am, I would stop it. But I'm like, at this point, everything feels like a good balance. It's not getting in the way of, the band actually doing what we're here to do, which is play music for people live, record. And then at home, being with family, it's not getting in the way with that. The moment it feels like it is, then I would pull back. And I think that's just the best way to be with it. If you're good at writing music, if you have fans, you will find people, I think you just can't let yourself get so crazy with the stuff and be like, I have to do this, or otherwise we'll never get fans. I'm like, well, we got fans before all of it, and there's always different apps and different things. So I just kind of always try to keep that in my back of my mind, like, don't lose focus of the main things here.
I've seen the death of a few social media sites. Rest in peace, MySpace. Oh, bring it back. Top song.
Yeah. I mean, we built it up on there, you know?
Around the same time, I think Through the Fire and Flames was my top song for quite a while.
Yeah,
So
it was, you know, we came up through that, and it going away didn't really affect anything at the end of the day, you know?
No. Right, we're going to get into track 7 from In the Court of the Dragon now, which is No Way Back Just Through. Just tell me a little bit about this track.
This was one I actually had written for the last record, or I should say I had as one of my demos for the last record that I never even brought in. We never jammed it. Just didn't, I felt like we had kind of like hit what we needed for the last record, and it just kind of sat there. And I think just because we started so soon after the previous record, we were always going to have some stuff that kind of filtered in from those writing sessions. This was one of them. It just kind of felt like a song that's like pretty straightforward. And I guess, I don't know, in a way, it was just like I wanted it to be more straightforward. I wanted it to be almost kind of like, you know, how would like, you know, Motorhead approach a song? It'd be like, yeah, there's like no frills. You're just kind of like right into it. Kind of gets to the point. Kind of almost has that kind of driving double bass type of part, you know, and that was it. Sometimes you just kind of go in and it doesn't need to be overthought, and that was kind of this song. The riffs are pretty self-explanatory. A lot of the stuff from like my actual demo, it's basically just we came in and it's like, you know, if it's working, it's working, and we just kind of roll from there. And then the hardest part, you know, vocals, hooks, how do you make it work? You know, you adjust here and there to kind of make vocals kind of work the best they can. And another lesson that we've learned is like, yeah, you make the vocal parts work, and you make the music work around that when you need to, not the other way around. You know, you don't want to force vocals around music. It can get a little tricky there, especially live. You learn that really quick when you make stuff that's like, oh, this is not easy to do live. And so yeah, this is like a song where you like let the vocals kind of set the pace of like where it needs to go. But straightforward, fun one live. We haven't done it too many times yet, but I do think it's going to kind of start making its way back into the set now that we're kind of like past the year of this record being out, where it's like you start kind of rotating a couple in. I think there's only maybe one. It's there's only one song I think from this record we haven't done live yet. So we've been pretty good about getting them in and playing them all.
Giving them a bit of airtime, as it were. And we'll do that right now as well. So this is track 7 from In the Court of the Dragon, No Way Back Just Through. Primordial Radio, that is track 8 from Trivium's latest album, In the Court of the Dragon. That is Fall Into Your Hands. And it kind of feels to me, Paolo, like at this point of the album is getting more melodic, sort of generally speaking. And that track actually feels quite Maiden influence. Obviously, you got the amazing drums at the start from Alex, which is just so cool. But then as the track progresses, it definitely feels like it's got this sort of epic Maiden feel to it.
Well, this is actually the first song we actually wrote together for the record. So maybe I think that's why it's kind of like a longer, more epic tune, because it's like we really had no thought of touring. There was nothing on the horizon. So I think maybe we were just like, well, I guess we got nothing else to do but like write a long song now and just kind of see where it goes. And it was fun because, you know, the first couple songs you write, really the first song you write is always the hardest, because the canvas is blank and you sort of are like, where do we go? What do we do? You know, what is this album going to be? And that's always the toughest thing to kind of answer. But when a song kind of breaks through and you start to kind of see it come together, and then, I mean, to me, that's the most inspiring, best feeling, is like that breakthrough of like creativity finally starting to kind of come through, and you're not doubting that you like lost the ability to do it. Sometimes in the beginning, I'm just like, man, we've written so many songs. Like, what the hell are we going to do now? You know,
classic writer's block, I guess, where you just go like, oh man, I ain't got my mojo right now.
Yeah, where is it? But yeah, it usually doesn't take long, especially in the jamming. Sometimes it's harder when you're just by yourself. At least I feel that way. I'm definitely more inspired when we're actually playing, because I think someone could start playing a riff and then Alex starts playing the drums, and crazy things just kind of pop out of those moments, and it's so much easier and effortless. And sometimes at home you're just like, what am I gonna do? Like I'm just listening to myself. Like, and playing to a drum machine is not the same. It might be sometimes, but I've always found that to be the least inspiring. But it's kind of necessary because that's usually where you kind of got to put down your notes and riffs. But
are there any antidotes for yourself for writer's block or feeling uninspired, like taking a trip away, doing different things, maybe go for a surf or whatever? Like,
yeah, sometimes like that stuff will help. Like, maybe after working out, you could kind of get in there and do it. But I find just writing with like the guys is the most inspiring thing. And I know that that will always,
presence in the room then is important, because there's many bands now who operate different countries, sending across WAVs and all that sort of thing. But that's for you as Trivium.
Yeah, we did the opposite. We, like I said, I was living in Chicago for a couple years. I moved back, and Alex actually moved from California. It was like a really big like commitment, especially for Alex, because he's never lived in Florida. I'm from there, so it wasn't as big, but it was still, you're uprooting in the middle of the pandemic. It was a big thing, but it felt like we need to be together to write. We can't do this remotely. I don't like it. Some people can do it that way, and I don't cast judgment on other people's like thing. I just don't like it. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to do it. I like being in the studio. I like being in presence of my bandmates, because I think we all write really well together. I think, when people are like, oh, how did Ascendancy work? It's like, well, we're jamming. We're guys, we're all like 18, 19 in a warehouse. I'm like, it's not really a rocket science of why that worked so well.
No, I mean, that's sort of been time memoriam for metal bands.
Yeah,
really,
it really does work. And then you kind of start to like, you get, you have other things in life, and you start to like drift from that. And we luckily, I think it's never gone too far from it, but we're always reminded like it does work. If something's not happening at home, like everyone comes together, we could write a song. Someone needed a song tomorrow from Trivium, get us in the studio, get us in the hangar together, we could pull something out. I'm confident that we could do it. And so that's always, I know that no matter what, even if I'm like just totally don't know where to go with things, I'm like, that will always bring something out of us.
So walk us through the process then of, if we can sort of be the fly on the wall with this next track. So track 9 from the album, From Dawn to Decadence. So we're in the hangar now, and you're putting this song together. How's it all working? What are you saying to each other?
I mean, I guess with a song like this is one of the last songs to be written. It's like, okay, well, we have these kind of epic tracks. We have this, we have that. What's missing? What do we need? And that usually is a good place to kind of go with things. And I guess, again, this could be kind of something that's like almost like an actual writing technique. If you were writing something out or writing a story, it's like you're asking questions: who, what, why, where. And it's more of like, what do we need now? What's missing? And so you go from there, and you start to kind of answer those questions with like the way the song's going. Okay, well, maybe it needs to be grooving. Maybe it needs to be faster. Maybe, any number of things. And then also the notes coming in from like Josh as he's hearing our ideas is like, hey, like I have this one idea for this part. Maybe we could kind of break it down a little bit more and create a little more space between the chords instead of it all just, you're playing straight through. We'll break it up, have it be a little bit more grooving in this chorus part. And so that's kind of how we do it. You're asking questions, you're trying, you're experimenting. You go back to the drawing board if it doesn't work. If it's just not if no one's really feeling it, you just got to do something different and work from there, and not like
that
get hung
must
up
be the
on
more
it.
difficult parts. Is say like, two of you are feeling it and two of you aren't.
Yeah,
that's probably the most difficult
it's tough.
part.
I think we're not like, back in the early days, it's a lot tougher. You're trying to like get your ideas in, and you want to feel like you're contributing, but there's a sort of maturity that comes with time when you know that people aren't feeling it and you want to do something else instead of, I want this idea to happen. You guys just don't get it. We need to do it.
You're the problem, not me.
It flips around. I'm like, if I bring something in and like, I just feel like people aren't into it, I don't want to do it. Even if like someone, and sometimes, it'll take the other people kind of convincing me let's stick with it a little bit, because I'm just like, man, if I'm not feeling it, if I'm not feeling like the room, like, oh, this riff's not really happening, let's do something else. It's, I don't know, makes life a lot easier. You're not fighting about dumb stuff. It's like it's working or it's not, or it needs to go back and get a little bit more time before we bring it out again.
Yeah, learning to let things breathe, just that little bit, a very important thing when writing songs. Let's get to this now. This is track 9, From Dawn to Decadence. Primordial Radio, track 9 from Trivium's latest album, In the Court of the Dragon. That is From Dawn to Decadence. And been here with Paolo today, playing through all of the tracks from the album. Dude, this has been great.
Yeah,
this has been so
been
cool.
A pleasure, man. Thank you.
Just go through and really sort of discuss the album. I love these chats. It's always great to find out more about the albums. And just very quickly, I want to say as well, we were talking about content creation earlier, and I was watching some of your bass playthroughs. And I think one thing that was great to see was the amount of people in the comments that were like, more bass, more bass, more bass. It kind of feels like metal bassists could be about to sort of really get their time in the sun. Does it feel a bit like that?
I think the thing with like good bass playing is like you really, if it's really good, you notice it. It's in the mix. It's live. It's in the mix. If it's not, it just gets kind of pulled out and you don't really think about it. But I guess my role as a bass player is to bring something out in the mix, fill kind of the space. And especially live for me, it's like being so precise and on it with the songs that it's like I can be in the mix. That's like really it. It's like, because you can kind of get away with the bass being a little lower maybe, but I'm like, man, when there's like a good bass tone in a mix, it makes guitars sound like $1 million.
I've been to many gigs over the years, and I've seen gigs where the bassist is cut out for a technical error or whatnot, and it's just not there. The guts or the feel,
and I've heard like
because
now you can do like virtual sound checks, so you can kind of hear what it sounds like. Or I'll listen on a phone. I'm like, wow, I can really hear myself pretty good there. And I'm like, I got to be on top of it. I can't be slacking here. So, it just kind of comes down to being like dependable and good and precise and just on it whenever you're on, recording or live. And that's all I'm trying to be. I think just years of doing it, you just get better naturally, and you find your tone, you find your sound, and you just kind of work from there.
And who would you pick as your top 3 bass sort of icons, idols, whatever you want to call it?
I guess like from just so early on in the day, like obviously Cliff Burton, Steve Harris. There's just been so many. Dee Dee from Overkill was always a fun one for me to listen to. Try to think about this. Billy Sheehan, of course, really, really inspirational. Just kind of one of those, like, he's like the guitar virtuoso of bassists, just that the dude that can shred as hard as any of the guys he's played with in bands. So those are always like pretty big ones. And then, there's just so many guys. It's just so crazy. I think bass playing, just hearing good bass playing in any track, like I don't know, throw on a Steely Dan record and you're just like, man, this bass playing is so good. It's just, I don't know. Just the instrument is inspiring. I love hearing good players, no matter the genre, because again, it's like a good bass player in a song. It's like it pops, it comes out. It does something there in the way that like any of the instruments, like a good player is inspiring. But I find the instrument inspiring to play.
And that's great to hear, because I think bass is joked about as, the instrument that's overlooked or whatnot. But if someone is watching this right now, maybe they're getting into a band because usually it's guitar or the drums or vocals. Why bass over the others? As someone who's been playing bass for about 20 years now, what's the real sort of joys of bass over the other instruments?
Yeah. When I started, I was about 11, gonna be, how old this year? Like 38. So it's like, it was kind of in the beginning, it was just like, oh, that was an instrument that was there to play with friends, and but from there, it's like what kept me going was that I just felt good to play, felt right. And because I learned guitar not long after, and I've been playing guitar almost as long in a way, but I've not been as drawn to it. Like, I love to play for writing, but I've never had the desire to, like, I want to play this in a band, or I need to play this part or whatever. Like that, I played one or two things on Trivium record. I did the intro to Throws, the actual melody thing. That was me, because I had it down, because I wrote it, And it was kind of a tricky part on a record. And I'm like, it's just one of those things of like, I can do it 100% right now, rather than like, just in the studio time, especially that record, time is money. So like, it's, I did that, and I did like the clean part in the Master Puppets cover. Those are like the only parts that I can think of, but that was it. But I don't really have any sort of desire to be like, I need to play the solo, I need to play this. I bring in my parts. I can show people how to play it, but I'm like, I like bass. I just prefer it. It's my thing.
So we are going to wrap up this conversation today by finishing on track 10 of the album, The Phalanx, which, of course, was a song that you sort of intertwined with the Elder Scrolls Online game as part of the music video. Worked really well, the combination of the two. How did that all come about? Because, that was a massive partnership that you put together there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of, through some of the Twitch stuff with... I think Matt maybe had been talking to some of those people, and we had done some stuff together before this, but it sort of like went on to a whole different level with this song, and the opportunity was there. And this is actually the song that was from the Shogun writing sessions. So it was like,
yes,
it's a big epic track. That's an epic game. It's 1 + 1 = 2 kind of situation, and I think it was great. It's nice to be able to be in front of different audiences with the kind of cross promo and stuff. And a lot of people that listen to metal play games, especially like these types of games. So it was seemed like a no-brainer, and it was fun to be able to get another video out of it with that.
It certainly does feel like a match made in heaven, and a great way in which to end the album as well. And I think it's cool that also that you were able to take something that was potentially going to be for Shogun and not just view that thing as something that was in the recycle bin, but actually go back to it and go, that actually is really cool, and maybe it works here, because a lot of bands, I'd imagine, leave stuff.
No, we did try it. We tried it on Silence in the Snow, and it didn't work. Wasn't right. Didn't feel like, because there's like basically the middle section of that song was taken out and used on another song on Shogun, Torn Between. That track got the middle section, so it's always been like the muscle car with no engine kind of situation. We had to build something new in the middle. And the first time we tried to bring it back, it didn't work. I'm glad we didn't. I don't think it would have been as good. This time, I think we were in a good spot to do it. I think having Alex in the band and just knowing where we needed to go to fit that middle section in and make it feel right. Make it feel like, it had to live up to because the actual part that went to Torn Between is actually perfect. It was great for it, but we couldn't copy it. But we had to do something that had lived up to that level of kind of progressive sound and intensity, and I think we did with I guess the modern version of the Phalanx, not the Shogun version. So it was good, and time also kind of really helped too, because we ended up making the chorus part a lot better than the original demo. So it was good, a good fitting closing end to this album. Sort of the end chapter of the crazy years of What the Dead Men Say and In the Court of the Dragon. I'm glad we had this time to make these records in the midst of the crazy times. But it was good. It felt like this was it's nostalgic, but new, fun, creative, process to do, and
it's the track that represents the album, I would say, as you talk about it there.
It was immediately, once we kind of came back to that song, it was this is definitely the last track of the record. And it felt good, because kind of felt like a cap on the end of almost like these last 3 records. In a way, I kind of view them all as these sort of kind of this trilogy in a way of of sound and sonics, and there was there's a through line with them. Maybe it's because we worked with Josh on all 3 as a producer. It's Alex's first 3 records with us. And so
there's a lot of synergy going on.
That's
there,
for sure. A definite vibe that I've felt. And where we go from here feels like that there's still that open.
Well, I was just about to say just before I let you go, because
it's the open question, you know.
But you know where you're at, because obviously you're a band that's so active. You did get 2 albums out very quickly. Have you started working on new material?
No, I mean we've been talking about what it is. Like again, it's like you start asking questions first, and then it's like then you go, all right, where do we go? What are we gonna do that's a little different? I think the hardest part is like the last 3. I feel really strongly about. You know, it's hard to say like, okay, this is the best record we've ever done, but I like these 3 records in a row are some of the strongest material we've made, and it feels like we're on a different level because of all these different reasons I've kind of mentioned, with like production, with Alex joining. We feel very strong, like we're in a good spot. Now the tough thing is like, where do you go with the next? And I think maybe the only thing I can really give for it is like more of finding what the sort of constraints and rules of the record will be. What are we going to do that kind of like, because I do think that's also part of it. Again, like the Pro Tools thing, like you have limitless options. Like in a way we have a lot of options, sort of like what we could do. Like, but I think if you have a sort of, what are the guidelines of like this record? What are we trying to stay within, and what is the goal of it? Like, I think a sharper goal of like what it is, what the lyrics, music, everything, production, mix, what it needs to be. When you have that, you know, and you have the abilities, then that's where you kind of can create some cool things. And I think that's just figuring those things out. I mean, I think we're going to take a little bit more time just because, you know, we got a lot of touring left this year. We also have to really kind of build out the studio at the hangar. That's the next real big project for us, because we're going to do it there for sure. But you know, it's going to be very exciting to kind of like have our space to not only write, but to record in, and that'll be fun. And, you know, we don't go too long in between records, but there definitely needs to be a little time, because we just really like, you know, 2 records in a row.
I don't think the world is going to judge you too much for taking a little bit more time after putting out a couple of albums within the space of a couple of years. That, and you do have to get these songs out, played live, which you are currently doing. So I wish you all the best for the rest of the UK tour. I'm sure you got to get off to do soundcheck. But Paolo, this has been such a pleasure to speak to you today and play through the album. We will finish now with Trivium and the Phalanx. Paolo, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Primordial Radio.